So I want to welcome everybody to Jewish Things That Go Bump in the Night, our pre-Halloween adult education class this month. We're going to have some fun tonight with a ritual you might be familiar with, but a ritual that has a lot of roots in things that go bump in the night, things that are kind of creepy and spooky. You know, in Judaism, we often think of the stuff that a lot of kids and young adults will celebrate on Halloween and scream about as being very un-Jewish. But we have tremendous amount of spooky things that make up our tradition. And we often avoid talking about them, but they are an important part of who and what we are. And as you'll see tonight, one of the most important rituals of our tradition, one we engage in on a weekly basis, is really, has really developed around a lot of this spookiness. So I want to begin by sharing a video with us tonight. Hold on one second. Just I'm noticing. Why all of a sudden our sharing abilities are gone. But anyway, I'll talk about this video. I'm not really, maybe perhaps you can hear it and you won't be able to see it. But the video is called "The Day the Hellfires Went Cold." Normally, I have absolutely no issues sharing, but of course, let's see if this comes up. 1 second, everybody, I apologize. Not really certain why this is doing this tonight. Guess it's the spooky stuff. All right, I'm gonna have to hold on there. Let me know if you can hear this story. Barbara, if you hear it, just because I see you, give me a thumbs up.
Is about Rav Moshe Lev of Sasov. And Rav Moshe Lev was a very holy person, and what he would...
You can hear, okay. So it's a story told by Rav Moshe, and you're going to hear a young woman share this story of the day the Hellfires went cold. It's a Jewish story.
Would spend his whole life doing is making sure that no one was unjustly in jail. So he would go travel from city to city, and if he heard that someone was in jail, he would bail them out. So whether they were in jail because they couldn't pay their rent on time, or because someone mistakenly accused them of something, he would make sure to take them out. And when Rav Moshe Lev was on his deathbed, he was very hopeless, and not because he was dying, but because he realized, you know, I know I'm going to Gan Eden. I know I'm not going to go to Gehenna. I know I'm not going to go to hell, but that means that I can't fulfill this mitzvah. I can't fulfill this commandment anymore of returning people out of jail. I can't pay anyone's bail in Gan Eden. I can't pay anyone's bail in the world to come. So while he's thinking about this, and while he's feeling so hopeless about this, he realizes that there's only one thing he can do. So before he has any process like to think about this, he passes away. He dies, and he decides to go to Gehenna. He decides to go to hell. And the angels that are in charge say, you know, this is a very great person. There's no way that he can enter hell with the fires still being on. So they decide to cool down the fires, and Rav Moshe Lev sees the angels, and the angels are like, you know, Rav Moshe Lev, first of all, what are you doing here? Second of all, there's souls here that need to have the fire. And he says, no, if there's souls here that have a minute of relief, then I'm staying here. And the angels say, no, that can't happen. We need to figure out some kind of compromise. And he says, okay, so how about I take all these souls up to Gan Eden, I take all these souls up to the world to come, and you can turn the fires back on after I leave. And the angels say, no, what are you talking about? You can't do that. And Rav Moshe Lev says, okay, how about you look at what I did throughout my life, and if I did the the mitzvah perfectly of taking people out of jail, then you'll agree to it. And the angels say, okay, you know, they don't expect that everything could be perfect, that every time he heard that someone was in jail, he went to take them out. But after looking through all the actions that he did, they realized, you know, it really was perfect. He really took every opportunity. So that day, first of all, hell was cold that day. There was no fires. Second of all the souls that were sinners left with Rav Moshe Lev up to Gan Eden. And with this last story, what I took away from it is that sometimes we are so busy thinking about what I will gain from this good deed, but we don't realize that a good deed is a good deed because it will affect other people and it will help other people. So sometimes I think we just need to go for something that will help other people, not whether it's a good deed, whether it's a mitzvah, whether it will help us, but because it will help another person. That's what we need to focus on.
So we have that story, and from it we learn that in our tradition, Judaism, we have the concept of hell. And with it, we have fire, and we have brimstone, and we have the nightmares that are incorporated in other religious traditions. Now, one of the challenges that we have in Judaism is that there are many different names for this place that in English we often refer to as hell. We're going to explore a couple of ancient texts tonight, many of them centuries old. The first one dating back to the Middle Ages from the Mishnah Torah, which tells us that hell has many names in Judaism. It says, as for hell, it is what the prophets of our tradition call figuratively by different names. They call it a pit of destruction. They call it a place of burning flame. They call it a leech. And by every word which means decay and destruction, it is called, because it is an expression of terminating decay from which there is no regeneration, and a loss which remains forever unreturned. Some of the most common names for hell in our tradition are Gehenna, Gehenna, Sheol, and of course, in English, we can refer to it as hell. Who winds up going to this underground region? Well, there's lots of different stories. In the Mishnah, in Pirkei Avot, we're taught that the arrogant, they're the ones who go to Gehenna, while the blushing, the modest people, the humble people, they go to the antithesis of hell, which is the Garden of Eden. If we look at one of the great prophets, and by the way, if you have questions tonight, don't be afraid to, raise your blue hand or type your question in the Zoom chat. That's totally fine. But in Ezekiel, it says, in the 12th year, on the 15th day of the month, the word of the Eternal came to me. O mortal, wail the dirge, along with the women of the mighty nations, over the masses of Egypt, accompanying their descent to the lowest part of the netherworld, among those who have gone down into the pit we call hell. Whom do you surpass in beauty? Down with you and be laid to rest with the uncircumcised. They shall lie amid those slain by the sword, amid those slain by the sword from Egypt. They've been dragged and left with all of her masses. From the depths of hell, the mightiest of warriors speak to him and his allies. The uncircumcised, the slain by the sword have gone down and lie there. Assyria, the enemy of the Jews, is there with all her company. Their graves round about, all of them slain, fallen by the sword, their graves set in the farthest recesses of the pit. All her company are round about her tomb, all of them slain, fallen by the sword, they who struck terror in the land of the living. So from the prophet Ezekiel, we learn that in Gehenna, in Sheol, in this place we can call hell, are a lot of the enemies of the Jewish people, including the Egyptians, the Assyrians, and even more so, it's not politically correct today by any means, but we have the uncircumcised, meaning those who chose not to be Jews. We don't necessarily like that belief today, but this is an ancient text. So it was anybody who chose to turn their back on Judaism, they would find themselves in Sheol. And one of the questions then is how long is one there? And again, going to ancient text, we're taught in the Mishnah that the great Rabbi Akiva used to say that there are 5 things that last for 12 months. And one of those is the judgment of the wicked people who find themselves in hell. So some say it's 12 months, others have a shorter time period. Still others will go and say it's an eternity. It really depends on your sin and whatever it is that brought you to the nether regions in our tradition. But I want to get at really the gory stuff, because that's really the essence of tonight. What is Gehenna or Sheol or hell? What is it like? Now, obviously, we don't know for certain. While there are some who claim throughout Jewish history that they had the ability to tour it, I don't really know how they did that. We are relying on some Jewish scholars and Jewish legend and traditions to teach us this. First of all, there is fire, and fire makes up a huge part of the nether region. And in the Talmud, it says there are 5 matters in our world, which are 1/60th of their most extreme manifestations. And one of those things is fire. Our fire, the fire that, makes, say, a candle. I don't know if with the background it's here. The fire that we use for lighting Shabbat candles, the fire that you light to warm a home or make a fire in the fireplace or light birthday candles. It's 1/60th of the strength of the fire that makes up Gehenna. So the fire of Gehenna is incredibly strong and incredibly powerful. And as you can imagine, it's there for a purpose. Again, keeping with tonight's theme of things that go bump in the night, and this is not normally the stuff I like to talk about when we talk about Judaism, but the fire of Gehenna is used as a torture device. It's used to torture the souls that are down there and make them uncomfortable. And in some midrash that's again centuries old, we're taught that the sound, if you were to hear the sound of Gehenna, the sound of the Jewish hell, it's the sound of terrible groaning that goes from one end of the world all the way to the other end of the world. Continuing with some of that midrash, we also have a fairly long story, but it's a really important one that will give you an unpleasant visual of Gehenna, of this nether region where the wicked supposedly go. Rabbi Yochanan, a great teacher, he opened and he said, "But the eyes of the wicked shall fail, and they shall have no way to flee, and their hope shall be the drooping of the soul." That comes from the book of Job. A body that isn't destroyed and its soul leaves in a fire that doesn't extinguish, And about them, the scripture says, for their worm shall not die, neither shall their fire be quenched. Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi taught, one time I walked on the road and I found the great prophet Elijah, Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, his memory be for a blessing. And Elijah said to me, is it your desire that I place you at the gate of hell? I said to him, yes, for he was curious. He wanted to know. And so he went to the gate of hell, and Elijah the prophet showed the great Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi. He showed me humans, and here's where it gets gory. He showed me humans that were hanging by their noses, and humans that were hanging by their hands, and humans that were hanging by their tongues, and humans that were hanging by their legs. And he showed me women that were hanging by their chest, and he showed me humans that were hanging by their eyes. And he showed me humans to whom they were feeding their flesh, and humans to whom they were feeding hot coals of broomwood, and humans sitting alive and worms were eating them. And Eliyahu Hanavi said to the great rabbi, these are the ones that about them it is written, for their worms shall not die. And he showed me humans to whom they were feeding fine sand, and they were feeding them against their will, and their teeth were breaking. And the Holy One, blessed be he, was saying to them, evil ones, when you ate stolen food, it was sweet in your mouths, and now there isn't within you the strength to eat, to fulfill that which is said, you break the teeth of the wicked. And he showed me humans whom they were casting from the fire to the snow, and from the snow to the fire, like this shepherd who shepherds his sheep from mountain to mountain. And about them, the scripture says, sheep-like they head to Sheol, with death as their shepherd. The upright shall rule over them at daybreak, and their form shall waste away in hell till its nobility be gone. Said Rabbi Yochanan, each individual angel is appointed to exact the punishment of one's sin. This one comes and judges him and goes on his way. And so the second one, and so the third one, and so all of them, until they recompense for all the sins that are in his hands. Sorry, my dogs are joining in. I want to pause for a minute because that's some pretty gory stuff. And I want to give you the opportunity to ask any questions or reflections. If anybody has one, again, feel free to unmute or type your question in the chat. I'll try to pull up Facebook and see if there are any questions as well as we pause here. But if there aren't questions, that's fine. But if anybody has a question, feel free. All right. Don't want to keep you awake with nightmares tonight. Now, as you can see behind me, I put the fires here to add to the drama of this evening. I want to talk a little bit about the Jewish fires that exist in the legend of Jewish hell. Again, this is a text from Talmud here, which teaches us that a rabbi by the name of Rab Zadok was summoned, and this is very PG-13, if not closer to R here, but Rabbi Zadok was summoned by a certain matron to have intimate relationships with her. Said the rabbi to her, my heart is faint and I am unable. Is there aught to eat? I'm hungry. And she answered him, yes, there is unclean food, meaning not kosher food. Well, what am I to deduce from this? She then fired the oven and was placing the forbidden food into it. And therein, when the rabbi ascended and sat in it, and she said to him, what is the meaning of this? He who commits the one sexual immorality falls into the other, the fire of Gehenna. Had I known that this was so heinous, she said, I would have not tormented you. So the rabbi jumps into the oven because of this impure relationship he's in, and it shows you again that the fires of hell are there to serve as a punishment. And in another midrash, it says that each of the 7 divisions, there are 7 divisions of the underworld, meaning of hell. In each of the 7 divisions, in turn, it has 7 subdivisions. And in each compartment, there are 7 rivers of fire and 7 rivers of hail. The width of each is 1,000 ales from the elbow to the hand, 1,000 of those. Its depth, 1,000, and its length, 300. And these rivers of fire and these rivers of hail flow from one to the other and are supervised by 90,000 angels of destruction. They are, besides, in every compartment, 7,000 caves. And in every cave, there are 7,000 crevices. And in every crevice, 7,000 scorpions. And every scorpion has 300 rings. And in every ring, 7,000 pouches of venom, from which flow 7 rivers of deadly poison. If a man handles it, he immediately bursts. Every limb is torn from his body. His bowels are cleft asunder, and he falls upon his face. There are also 5 different kinds of fire in hell. One devours and absorbs. Another devours and does not absorb. While the third absorbs and does not devour, and there is still another, which neither devours nor absorbs. And furthermore, a fire which devours fire. There are coals big as mountains, and coals big as hills, and coals as large as the Dead Sea, and coals like huge stones. And there are rivers of pitch and sulfur flowing and seething like live coals. I mean, really awful, gory stuff, which I imagine, unless I'm wrong, many of you have never heard a lot of this stuff. I'm curious if anybody has ever heard of, the underground rivers of fire and hail in our tradition. Feel free to jump in if you want to. But it is definitely a part of who we are. Now, incorporated into the fire, as the fire burns, we're taught that it gives off the smell of sulfur. And we see sulfur being associated with evil and in punishment, even in the Torah itself, our oldest and still our foundation text, where we're taught in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, when God rains down the fire on the evil cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, the fire smells of sulfur. It's called sulfurous fire. And that is one of our first references here. And we see even in the prophet Ezekiel that when God punishes people, which again is part of the God of the Hebrew scriptures, I will punish him with pestilence and with bloodshed, and I will pour torrential rain, hailstones, and sulfurous fire upon him and his hordes and the many people with him. I see a question from the wonderful Mark Gross. Who decides where you go, and are you there for eternity? So, as we read a little bit ago, some say you're there for 12 months, and perhaps you're there because you sinned. And ultimately, it's up to God and God's workers, which are the angels, to determine if you should go straight to the Garden of Eden or if you need to either be tormented. And again, this is not my theology today. Okay, we're having fun tonight. But in parts of our tradition, we have the belief that if you have sinned for various different reasons, you are sent to Sheol, Gehenna, whatever you want to call it, and you live in torment. You have the ability to liberate yourself through some type of tshuva or repentance, and off you go to Gan Eden if you are able to bring about that repentance. Now, I'm going to confuse you for a minute because it is Wednesday night. Normally, this ritual that we're about to take part in is done on Saturday night. You can do it a little bit later, especially if you missed it, but I want to make Havdalah, and you'll understand why in a little bit. Some of you are familiar with Havdalah. It consists of blessing over the wine, blessing over spices. I have some cloves in my spice box, and we light the candle that is our Habdala candle. Yai lai la 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 lai lai ai la 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 lai lai ya la lai ai lai lai la lai lai la lai. We bless the candle. Actually, we bless the wine first. I'm lighting the candle, so I'm thinking that Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Borei peri hagafen, borei peri hagafen. We drink the wine. Yai, yai, la 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 la, yai, yai, la 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 la, ya la la, yai, la la. We smell the spices and bless them. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei minei v'samim borei minei v'samim yai yai la 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 yai yai la 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 ya la la la. We bless the light of the candle, and as we do so, we look into our fingernails to see our reflection. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei meorei haesh borei meorei haesh yai yai la 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 yai yai la 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 ya la la. We then go on to say a blessing. I won't do it here, but we say, thank you, God, for teaching us to separate between the holy, kadosh, and the non-holy. And we say this typically on Saturday night as we're leaving the holiness of Shabbat and we're transitioning to the regular, ordinary, non-holy day of Sunday, which, remember, in Judaism begins on Saturday night. And then what some people will do is they'll take a little bit of the wine and they'll put it on their eyes, or they'll put it behind their ears, or they'll sprinkle it on their table. And we're going to talk about all of these things, because what Habdallah does is protect us from a lot of the things that we've talked about. We do lots of beautiful Havdalahs outside. We do them at the synagogue. We never talk about this stuff. We don't talk about the spooky side of Havdalah, but Havdalah is just as powerful, if not more powerful, than those evil eyes or those red ribbons you might wear around your wrist, or the mezuzah you put on your door, or your grandmother spitting a few times and throwing salt over her shoulder, or the expression kanahara. All of those things are encapsulated in Havdalah, this ritual we do every single week. Is I hate to use the word magic because Judaism doesn't endorse magic, but there is magic in Havdalah designed to keep us safe and protected. And the fact that it's so incorporated into Havdalah shows us that while my theology might not incorporate hell, your theology might not incorporate hell, the rituals that we do to this day are still defined by that underground region that worries so many people. And you remember the story that I started with, and if you didn't, it was a story about a rabbi who who cared so much for people that he convinced God to turn the fires of hell off for a day to give the people reprieve. Actually, we're taught that when Shabbat starts on Friday night, what stops? You want to take a guess, or maybe you might know. The fires of hell stop on Shabbat. Why? Because even sinners get a day of rest. Even sinners get a day of rest. And if the fire stops, what stops as well? The smell of sulfur. There's no smell of sulfur because the fires aren't going on. Now, when we make Havdalah, when we see the 3 stars in the sky and we know that Shabbat is over and we light the Habdala candle, guess what also starts back up again? The fires of hell. And with the fires restarting, what do we have the potential to smell up here on earth? Sulfur. And so incorporated into our Havdalah ritual is the smelling of spices, whether it be cloves or other types of perfumed spices as well, whatever it be. One of the reasons we do this, and we'll talk about another reason, which is related to some spooky stuff, is to cover up the stench of hell. Again, not something we talk about when we do our loving, caring, family-friendly Havdalahs, when we do a bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah that ends in Havdalah. We don't talk about that, but it's an integral part of the Havdalah ceremony, the ability to cover up that smell of hell. Now, Havdalah is a very, very dangerous time in Judaism. It's the most dangerous time of the week. And we're taught that our soul, remember in Judaism, we're made up of 2 parts, a body and a soul, the soul being the neshama. The body is just the vessel. The soul is truly who we are. And something really amazing, something beautiful we're taught happens on Shabbat. And that is on Shabbat, we actually are blessed with another soul. We get 2 souls on Shabbat. And it's as if that extra soul just elevates us and lifts us and fills us with such joy. But as we light the Habdala candle, as we see the 2 stars, as the gates as the fires of hell start up again, as we potentially can smell the sulfur, that second soul that we get has to return to the Garden of Eden. And it leaves us. And that is difficult for us because our regular soul, this one that we live with all week, has enjoyed the company of the second soul and feels sad and feels depleted as a result of that soul leaving. And our soul is also sad to be leaving holy time and entering sacred time. Imagine how you used to feel when winter vacation was over when you were a kid and you had to go back to school, right? That's the closest analogy I can think of, that the fun is over and we've got to go back to what Judaism would call non-holy time. And so the soul is down. And that's another reason that the rabbis tell us we need to smell the spices, because it lifts, it kind of energizes our soul a little bit, but there's more to it. For that, I have to just have fun tonight and change my background here, because we're going to switch a little bit from fires more to the things that go bump in the night. The reason that Havdalah is so incredibly dangerous is because as we lose our extra soul, and as we are transitioning from holy time to regular time, we have to realize and be aware of the fact that Judaism teaches us, but we don't talk a lot about, demons. And there are lots of demons out there all the time. But as the soul leaves us, we run the risk, and this is weird stuff, we run the risk of becoming possessed by one of those demons, which is a detached soul. We run the risk of being harmed spiritually. And so we have to take all precautionary measures to protect ourselves. In the 9th century, and probably dating back even earlier, there was a form of Habdallah that has become known as the Habdala de Rabbi Akiva. Probably not directly related to the Rabbi Akiva we've read about tonight, the Rabbi Akiva from the Talmud, but it's definitely an old text that might date back to Babylonian times. And it incorporated the 3 blessings that we just said that make up a Havdalah, but a lot of other blessings and readings that capture the fact that moving from sacred to profane time is dangerous. And by saying certain blessings, we can protect ourselves. Protect ourselves perhaps from dogs. That wasn't part of the spooky stuff. The Habdallah de Rabbi Akiva uses powerful entities, calls upon powerful entities in Judaism, like angels and holy letters, to protect us from evil spirits and the demons that are out and about in the world. There are incantations, and it's a very complicated text, and it really hasn't been fully translated into English. I'm going to read to you just a little bit. But there are incantations in this Havdalah that are very detailed and mention a broad variety of demons and the desire to expel these demons and concentrate on stopping witchcraft. Here's one line. By means of the angels of God, and this would be said during Havdalah, by means of the angels of God, I adjure, and I surely bind, and I surely cut off, and I surely forswear against any spirit or demon or spells or bindings or charms. To this day, although we don't really say it much at Ramat Shalom, there is an opening blessing. If you have a prayer book at home, one of our prayer books, you can find it on 523. And it's a blessing you say at the beginning of Havdalah, before you say the blessings we just said. And here it is in English. It's nowhere near as blatant in sorcery as the Rabbi Akiva's Havdalah, but you'll see even in there is the desire to use Havdalah to protect ourselves. Here's a regular English translation. Behold, God is my savior. I will trust God and not be afraid, for my strong faith and song of praise for God will be my salvation. You will draw water joyously from the well springs of salvation. Salvation is God's. May your blessing rest upon your people. God of the heavenly armies is with us. We need armies to protect ourselves. The Lord of Jacob is a fortress protecting us from those demons. Doesn't say that, but that's what they're talking about. God of the heavenly armies, happy is the individual who trusts you. God, protect us. God, redeem us. The King will answer us on the day we call God. The Jews had light, happiness, joy, and honor. May we have the same. I will raise the cup of Havdalah, the cup of salvation, and call out in the name of God. And then you go into the Kiddush, the blessing over the spices, and the blessing over the candle. Going back to the Habdallah de Rabbi Akiva. By the way, in that Havdalah, it talks about being bound and being tight. And some suggest that's the reason that the Habdala candle is a braided candle. It's the idea of protecting yourself and keeping things so close that you don't give any entryway to one of the demons that is lurking out there. And so that is, it captures the idea that in that opening blessing I read, it says, I adjure and I bind a binding, and I limit a limitation, and I vow a vow against every single demonic force that's out there. Now that you might be saying, come on, Judaism really talks about demons? And again, we don't talk about it much, but without hesitation, I say 100% Judaism talks about demons. We're taught that at the beginning of the creation of the world, God creates 10 things, one of them being, the ram's horn that we blow at Rosh Hashanah. But some also say that one of the 10 things that were created on the eve of Shabbat at twilight was demons. In the Talmud, let me just pause and make certain there aren't any questions, because I'm throwing a lot of stuff out at you. So I know some of you are chatting in there, but feel free if there are questions online in the Zoom room to just unmute yourself. But if not, I'll keep going on. Okay, so in the Talmud, one of the rabbis, Abba Benjamin, says, if our eyes had the power to see demons, no creature would survive. Rabbi Abaye says, again in the Talmud, demons are more numerous than we are. And this is the Talmud, okay? This isn't some hocus pocus, weird Jewish text. This is mainstream Judaism. Demons are more numerous than we are, and they surround us like the ridge around a field. Rabbi Huna says, again in the Talmud, every single one of us on this Zoom room tonight, every one among us has 1,000 demons on his left hand and 10,000 demons on his right hand. Another rabbi says the crushing, if you're in a crowd and there's a rush in the crowd that doesn't seem to make sense, this is brought about by demons. Fatigue in your knees, this is caused by demons. The wearing out of the clothes of the scholars, this is due to demons rubbing against you. The bruising of the feet, this is caused by demons. If one wants to discover demons, this is weird. Again, this is Talmud, not a weird book. If one wants to discover demons, take sifted ashes and sprinkle them around your bed at night. And in the morning, when you wake up, you will see something like footprints of a rooster around your bed. This, they say, is demons. Now, the Talmud goes on to provide a step-by-step process for how to actually see demons beyond sprinkling ashes around your bed. I would say that this ritual is not to really be practiced, but it's worth hearing it because, again, I want to reinforce the idea that things go bump in the night Jewish things that go bump in the night has been a long-standing spooky tradition for centuries. So the first thing you're supposed to do, according to the Talmud, is find a cat. And you need to find a cat, and maybe Breda can help us with this because Breda is married to a veterinarian. I'm just teasing you because it's about a cat here. So if you have a cat, if any of them are firstborn female black cats, you're in luck. By the way, we often attribute black cats to other traditions and spooky traditions and witches. Well, here we have our own tradition. So you find a firstborn female black cat born to another firstborn female black cat. And if you find this cat, you can politely ask if it happens to have kept its placenta after it gave birth, okay? And if that cat, that black cat born to a black cat that was a female happens to have had, or its owner happens to have had its placenta, you take the placenta and you get a mortar and a pestle and you grind the placenta and you burn it in a fire and you grind it into fine ash. You place the ash in a special iron tube and you seal it with an iron seal until you're ready to use it. Okay? And then you tilt your head back and you pour the ashes in your eyes. And once you do that, according to the Talmud, you will have for a limited time the ability to see all of the demons around you. I don't encourage you to do that because it's not that I think that the ashes are going to make you crazy because you're going to see all the demons. I just really don't think it's sanitary or wise. But this is our tradition teaching teaching us this. Now, demons in our tradition have a couple of different names. The most common name is Dybbuk, D-Y-B-B-U-K, which often means a possession. When a soul that is disembodied from a body, meaning somebody has somehow passed away, their body is buried, and their soul somehow never made it to the place it's supposed to go to. Hopefully that was to the Garden of Eden, but it could have been down below to the Jewish hell. If that soul didn't make it to where it goes, it's kind of wandering. Think about what we talked about with Havdallah, that time of transition when our extra soul leaves us and goes back to the Garden of Eden. It's the perfect opportunity for a Dybbuk to kind of sneak in there if we're not careful, and why some of these rituals and superstitions have developed. Some of these souls, these Dybbuks, are harmless. They're just lost. But you don't want to be possessed with a lost soul because that can be confusing. And unfortunately, according to tradition, some of these souls are truly evil, and we want to avoid them. And so we say those blessings at Havdalah, or we incorporate that ancient ritual Habdala of Rabbi Akiva into our tradition. And we smell the spices. Sorry, my background makes it difficult to see the spices, to keep our regular soul strong and not be overcome by the sulfur and have our soul be weak, because if we're weak, we become susceptible to being possessed by a soul. Now, one of the things we also do is we drink wine. Havdalah rotates around wine. Wine in Judaism is the symbol of life, and we want to surround ourselves with vitality and strength and life during this period of transition. But there's more to it. And if we go back to around the 1300s in Spain, there's a book that was written called the Tur, T-U-R. And I'm going to read to you a little bit about that, because the essence of wine being a powerful protection, at least the way we use wine, once we see that, we can see why it makes up an important part, not just of Havdalah, but of virtually every major Jewish ritual, from a wedding to a bris to a Shabbat service. So the Torah takes us to the flood story and to Noah. And after the flood story, Noah went to plant a vineyard. And as he's planting the vineyard, we're taught, he was approached by a demon who informed him that he, the demon, and Noah were partners in the vineyard. And the demon warned Noah and said, make sure that you keep your portion, for if you don't, I'm going to harm you. Now, what does that mean? Well, the sages teach us that if a person is a good person, wine can be used in a way that will make him happy. If he's got demons, or if he's a bad person, or if he's struggling, wine, the text says, will drive him to insanity. This is because the text says there are two parts to wine, one that is sacred or holy, and the other that is unholy and dangerous. We all know that wine, any form of alcohol that is misused, can be dangerous and push people to a very dark spot. This was something that in the 1300s, they were already aware of and they were writing about. One that comforts those, one that brings joy to people, wine that brings joy to people, wine that is used responsibly, wine that is blessed, wine that is part of a ritual, a Passover Seder, a Shabbat dinner and such. That's a good thing. But wine that pushes people to the dark place, wine that is abused, wine that is not respected, wine that is not blessed, well, this pushes people to that unholy place and it can become dangerous. At Havdalah, when we talk about separating between the holy and the non-holy, when our extra soul leaves us, when we have the potential to smell the sulfur, when there are so many demons and bad things around us and we're trying to hold on to what's good, it's precisely why we have to say that blessing over the wine before we have it, because that's what makes the wine another powerful tool in keeping us holy and keeping us safe. It's also why, and I know a lot of people aren't familiar with it, at the end of Havdalah, after you've taken a sip of the wine, many people will take some of the wine from the cup and put it on their eyes or put it behind their ears or sprinkle it on their table. It almost becomes like an amulet to keep us safe and protected and to offer us good things and to ward away, keep away all of those bad and awful things. So we've got the wine and we've got the spices, and then we've got the candle, which keeps popping in and out because of my background. The Habdala candle, as many of you know, this is quite a colorful one. They come in all different colors. They're braided candles, multi-wicked. I told you one of the reasons why it might be the idea of binding ourselves and keeping us safe. But again, we need to think about why a Habdala candle. And this goes back to the Garden of Eden, okay, which is the antithesis of Gehenna, the antithesis of hell, and supposedly the place the soul, our soul that leaves us, goes to at the end of Shabbat. In the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve are created, and the sun sets, especially after that first Shabbat. And what happens to poor Adam? Adam becomes terrified because Adam thinks it's going to be dark forever. And he sees darkness as a terrible symbol, and darkness can be incredibly frightening. It's not a coincidence that the demons that we worry about at Havdalah come out as the sun goes down. So God in the Midrash inspires Adam to take two stones and strike them together. And what happens? There's a spark. And for the first time, humanity creates light. God creates it at the beginning of the creation story. And as the creation story winds down and the first Shabbat, that seventh day, comes to an end, humanity creates light. And that light is protection. That light gives Adam comfort. Fire is the human response to God's light. But fire, as we know, just like the wine, has two sides. It can be protection, it can give us warmth, it can give us comfort, it allows us to cook, it allows us to do ritual, but fire that is abused can be destroyed. And that fire that is destroyed is echoed in the ground below us when we talk about the Gehenna stories and the smell of sulfur. And one of the things that we do when we light the fire, and I saw Barbara doing it tonight, when we light the fire of Havdalah, is to look for the reflection of the flame in our fingernails. And that, in a way, is no different than putting the wine on our eyes. It's the desire to turn the flame, or at least the reflection, into an amulet, because there's a tradition that says for single women, when they do Habdallah and they look into their fingernails, they'll see the picture of their husband to be. Very sexist, I know. And we could say perhaps, for single men, the same type of thing. They see their spouse in their eyes, in their reflection. But the idea is that when you see the reflection, what you're seeing is something good. You're not seeing what you could see if you put, the placenta ashes in your eyes. You would see the demons. The fire is allowing you to see only goodness and happy things in front of you. And thus Havdalah itself is this very protective ritual. So I once again want to engage ourselves in the Havdalah ritual. And as we go through these rituals, again, I just want you to think and look at these rituals a little bit differently tonight than perhaps you have over the years, and let you see that as we talk about things that go bump in the night, Saturday nights in Judaism are a very spooky time, but we have created ways to actually keep ourselves safe. And the first thing that we do is we say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pari hagafen. We bless and sanctify the wine so that it becomes holy in and of itself. It is not something we abuse, and we drink the wine with the hope that it will fill us with that holiness. And of course, we take the wine and we dip it on our bodies if people choose to do so, and we sprinkle it on our tables. We then take the spices and we say, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei minei v'samim. We smell the spices, we avoid the smell of sulfur, and we keep our soul strong, because our soul, we have to send that other soul back. And this soul needs to remain strong to avoid any of the things that go bump in the night of taking over us. And then we bless the candle itself. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei meorei ha'esh. And we look for that reflection so that we see goodness before us. And we use the flame in a powerful way, not in the way it's being used below us with the demons. And of course, the flame becomes a protective device for us, and we can begin our week with strength. And who do we sing about? We sing about Eliyahu Hanavi, who supposedly, Elijah the prophet, who will usher in for us the Messianic era. And with the Messianic era, where do we supposedly all go? To the Garden of Eden. We avoid Gehenna below us, and we embrace all good things as we go through that period of transitioning out of holy into, say, a non-holy time. So that was a lot of information. I don't think I've ever talked for so long, but I talked for an hour straight. I'm more than happy to take any questions from anybody, but just wanted to make certain we could have a little bit of fun as we get ready for our spooky night. And hey, Barbara, does your cat have a placenta that we can borrow? No. But I hope that everybody had a little bit of fun tonight. Again, this is not my theology. It's not the theology of our synagogue, and it's not the theology of most people in our synagogue, but it is part of our tradition. And I think, at least for those of us old enough to study and engage with this stuff, it's an important part of our tradition, especially as we get ready for, the spooky night of the year, which is not by any means Jewish, but often people say that in a way that kind of dismisses tries to elevate Judaism as being above some of the rituals and superstitions of Halloween. But as you saw tonight, a lot of those rituals, whether it be the black cat or demons or, the devil and things like that, those have its roots in our Jewishness. So it's okay to have fun with this stuff. And I think it's okay that we realize that our tradition has it. We just avoid talking about it. So I hope it was a fun, informative little adventure, and make certain that you keep yourself safe from things that go bump in the night as we enter our spooky time of year. So thank you, everybody. Have a good night. James, it's good to see you guys. Hope to see you guys soon. Michael, glad you were with us. Bonnie, Anise, Shelley, Barbara. Barbara, what's the kitty's name? Oh, that's Penny. That's right. I knew that.
Penny.
And Donna, and everybody on Facebook as well. The Grosses. Thank you guys for being. There's Bonnie. Hi, Bonnie.
Hi.
To see you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Hope to see lots of you in person or online for Shabbat. See you in a couple nights.
Bye.
Bye.